Tensions in the Middle East are rising fast. Two Israeli soldiers were killed in a checkpoint attack, and now the fragile ceasefire in Gaza is on the verge of collapse. Israel has begun calling up reservists, and Prime Minister Netanyahu has issued an ultimatum: release the hostages or military operations resume. Hamas, in turn, is accusing Israel of breaking the deal. If this ceasefire fails, a new wave of violence could erupt, drawing in regional powers and impacting global stability. Oil prices, security risks, and even potential U.S. involvement could all be on the table. What does this mean for preppers? Let's break it down. Welcome to Preppers News from Preppers Paradigm, where we cover global events from a prepper's perspective. Today, we're looking at the escalating situation in Israel and Gaza, why the ceasefire may be coming to an end, and what that could mean for the rest of the world. Israel is already preparing for a major military operation, while Hamas is refusing to release hostages unless its demands are met. If full-scale conflict resumes, it could have serious consequences for global security, oil prices, and the economy. In this video, we'll cover what's happening now, what could happen next, and why preppers should be paying close attention. And as always, I use a computer-generated voice because my own is hard to understand due to an injury. Violence between Israel and Palestinian militants has been escalating, with the latest incident occurring on February 4, when 2 Israeli soldiers were killed and 8 others injured in a shooting at the Taser checkpoint in the West Bank. The gunman has not been identified, but the attack has heightened tensions between the two sides. This comes as part of an ongoing conflict that has seen Israeli forces conduct airstrikes in Gaza and military raids in the West Bank, while Palestinian militant groups have launched attacks in response. Over the past few months, both sides have suffered heavy casualties, and the situation remains highly volatile. In response to the latest attack, Israel has reinforced its military presence in key areas, tightening security at checkpoints and increasing patrols near the borders of Gaza and the West Bank. Officials have warned that further attacks could lead to more aggressive military action, putting the fragile ceasefire at risk. While isolated incidents like this have happened before, this attack is different because it comes at a critical moment, just as the ceasefire agreement is under strain. Israel's government is already moving closer to resuming full-scale military operations, and this latest violence may serve as justification for a renewed offensive. The ceasefire between Israel and Hamas is on the verge of collapse. Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu has issued an ultimatum, warning that if Hamas does not release all remaining Israeli hostages by midday Saturday, the ceasefire will be over and military operations will resume. Hamas has confirmed plans to release additional hostages, following earlier exchanges facilitated by Egypt and Qatar. However, tensions remain high, as Israel insists that all remaining hostages must be freed, while Hamas has pushed back against certain demands. In response, Israel has begun calling up reservists and reinforcing its southern border, signaling that it is preparing for a potential large-scale military operation in Gaza. Israeli officials have stated that they are ready to resume combat operations immediately if negotiations fail. If the ceasefire collapses, Israel is likely to launch intense airstrikes and ground operations, similar to those seen in previous conflicts. This could lead to a prolonged period of violence, with civilian casualties rising on both sides. The breakdown of negotiations could also result in regional instability, with the potential for involvement from groups in Lebanon, Syria, or even Iran. The coming days will be critical in determining whether diplomacy holds or if Israel launches another full-scale military offensive in Gaza. If that happens, the impact will not only be felt in the Middle East, but could have far-reaching consequences worldwide. If the ceasefire collapses and military operations resume, the conflict could escalate beyond Gaza, drawing in other regional powers and increasing the likelihood of a broader war. One of the biggest concerns is the potential involvement of Hezbollah, a powerful militant group based in Lebanon with strong ties to Iran. In past conflicts, Hezbollah has launched rocket attacks on Israel in response to Israeli military actions in Gaza. If this happens again, Israel could retaliate with airstrikes on Hezbollah targets, expanding the conflict beyond Palestinian territories. Another major factor is Iran's influence in the region. Iran has long supported both Hamas and Hezbollah, providing weapons and funding. If Israel's military operations intensify, Iran may increase its support for Palestinian militants, or even directly intervene, further destabilizing the region. Israel's relations with neighboring countries like Egypt and Jordan could also be affected. Both countries have played key roles in ceasefire negotiations, but if violence escalates, they may be forced to reconsider diplomatic ties with Israel. Any shifts in alliances could change regional trade and security dynamics, impacting supply chains that reach far beyond the Middle East. For the United States, a worsening conflict could increase pressure for direct involvement. The U.S. has historically backed Israel, but a full-scale war could force American leaders to make tough decisions on military aid, sanctions, or even potential intervention. If U.S. forces become involved, the global impact of this conflict would grow significantly. At this stage, the risk of escalation depends on whether the ceasefire holds. But if full-scale war resumes, it could have wider geopolitical consequences, affecting not only the Middle East, but the global economy, energy markets, and international security. While the conflict may seem distant, its effects could reach preppers in unexpected ways. A renewed war in the Middle East has the potential to directly impact everyday life. One of the biggest concerns is the effect on oil prices and energy supply. The Middle East is home to some of the world's most important oil-producing nations, and any instability in the region often results in rising fuel costs. If conflict spreads and disrupts oil production or key shipping routes, gas prices could rise sharply, increasing transportation and supply chain costs for essential goods. Another factor to consider is the potential for geopolitical shifts and economic consequences. If the U.S. gets involved in the conflict, either through military support or sanctions, it could trigger trade disruptions and inflationary pressures. Sanctions on Middle Eastern nations could limit the supply of crucial materials, while further instability in global markets could affect investments, currency values, and overall economic security. There is also the possibility of military escalation drawing in the U.S. If American forces are deployed or military aid is increased, it could lead to defense spending spikes, domestic political tensions, and increased international hostilities. Security concerns are another issue. Whenever tensions rise in the Middle East, there is a higher risk of terror threats worldwide. Intelligence agencies often increase domestic security measures during these times, which could lead to heightened surveillance, travel restrictions, and stricter security checks at borders and airports. For preppers, staying informed about global events is critical. A worsening conflict could lead to supply shortages, higher prices, and political shifts that affect daily life. Having food, fuel, and essential supplies stockpiled is always a smart move, especially when global instability increases. Keeping an eye on economic indicators, fuel prices, and military developments will help preppers anticipate the next possible disruptions before they happen. The situation in the Middle East is shifting rapidly, and the next few days could determine whether war breaks out again. With Israel calling up thousands of reservists and Hamas refusing to release hostages, the ceasefire is barely holding together. If it collapses, expect military escalation, economic disruptions, and rising fuel prices, all of which could impact preppers worldwide. Staying informed is key. If this conflict spreads, it could lead to supply chain issues, inflation, and even U.S. involvement. Preppers who stay ahead of events will have a better chance of adapting before disruptions occur. Make sure you're subscribed to Preppers News so you don't miss future updates on this and other global developments. And for more on preparedness and global risks, check out our main channel, Preppers Paradigm. What do you think? Will the ceasefire hold, or is a major war coming? How could this impact preppers? Drop your thoughts in the comments below. Thanks for watching. Stay prepared, and we'll see you next time.